Days 1 till 4 on LBC.
Well, it was no secret, was it, that David Cameron wanted to extend Britain's airstrikes, the UK's airstrikes over Iraq into Syria, and he's just made it clear in the Commons that he intends to try to build that consensus and bring it back to Parliament for a vote. Talk about that in just a second with Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor. But both he and Jeremy Corbyn, in his response to the Prime Minister, spoke of cohesion, the importance of unity. And yet, since the Paris attacks, women from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community have been sent a text advising them to stay indoors. This is in the UK, mind you, not Paris. I think that is bad advice. I think that is counterproductive. But then I'm not a Muslim woman in Britain, am I? We'll talk about that from 2. We'll also touch on the Charlie Sheen story after 3. Charlie Sheen has just announced, it's become clear that he does indeed have HIV. There's been a lot of speculation around it. I'll talk after 3 as to whether that really is anything to have a commotion about. Are we still in a position on things like HIV where it's, when we discover that somebody in the public eye, even a huge Hollywood star, has that condition? It reminded me of the Rock Hudson, and when it emerged that Rock Hudson was gay. And I think I'm right in saying that emerged posthumously after he died. So we'll talk about that after 3 anyway. Why, in this day and age, is there still a kind of dramatic hoo-ha around those kinds of announcements? Let's have a listen to what David Cameron said. He said a lot in this statement he's just made to Parliament. Let's just have a quick listen to some of it.
In this situation, we do not protect the British people by sitting back and wishing that things were different. We have to act to keep our people safe, and that is what this government will always do.
He broke down the elements of what he wanted to talk about, to the security response broadly, to the UK counter-terror measures here. He touched on Syria and what was going on there and the kind of support that was being offered to countries like Turkey, support from the UK. And he also talked about whether or not we are doing all we should, which brought us on to the question of whether we should extend those strikes into Syria. And it was no surprise that he did that, Theo, really, was it?
No, it wasn't a surprise because, of course, a number of Tory MPs, even Labour MPs, have been clamouring for military action in Syria following the horrific events in Paris last Friday. Of course, British military action, British involvement of the RAF and also Royal Navy jets had been backburnered following a report by the Cross-Party Foreign Affairs Select Committee earlier this month. And that report from the committee claimed that Britain should not intervene until there was a coherent international strategy which, and I'm quoting here, had a realistic chance of defeating militants, namely ISIL. Today, Mr Cameron said that he would respond to that report formally, setting out the case for bombing ISIL in Syria.
My firm conviction is that we need to act against ISIL in Syria. There is a compelling case for doing so. It is for the government, I accept, to make that case to this House and to the country. I can therefore announce that as a first important step to do so, I will respond personally to the report of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. I will set out our comprehensive strategy for dealing with ISIL, our vision for a more stable and peaceful Middle East. Now, this strategy, in my view, should include taking the action in Syria I've spoken about. And I hope that in setting out the arguments in this way, I can help build support right across this House for the action that I believe is necessary to take.
Now, Sheila, the conundrum facing David Cameron up until now has been how does he set out the case for military action in Syria without losing a vote in the House of Commons? Because, of course, what happened 2 and a bit years ago when he put the case towards two MPs in the House of Commons, they were Tory rebels, and, of course, then Ed Miliband, depending on which side you take, welched on a deal to provide Labour support for those airstrikes, and David Cameron was badly burned from that, and he doesn't want the same thing to happen again. He said that it would damage Britain's reputation if that were to happen. So that's why he's now found this other way, this alternative way of setting out the case, therefore allowing MPs from all sides to look at it and then decide whether they'd change their mind or support military action in Syria. And that's what he wants to do. And then he can make the case in the House of Commons and have the vote, but with some degree of certainty that he will actually win it. And of course, the game changer in all of this is what happened in Paris last Friday.
We face a direct and growing threat to our country, and we need to deal with it, not just in Iraq, but in Syria too. I've always said there's a strong case for us doing so. Our allies are asking us to do this, and the case for doing so has only grown stronger after the Paris attacks. We cannot expect, we should not expect, others to carry the burdens and the risks of protecting our country.
Now, Jeremy Corbyn was opposite David Cameron, and he's had a difficult couple of days, of course, because he said yesterday he couldn't give that support to David Cameron. He didn't say that he wouldn't provide that support, but of course he was equivocal in the way that he approached it, and he will need David Cameron needs Jeremy Corbyn's support we think he's going to need his support to win that vote. Now, of course, Jeremy Corbyn had his backbenchers behind him, many of them very unhappy with the way that he's handled the situation. This was how the Labour leader responded.
In the face of such tragic events and the horror, anxiety and sorrow that have caused the British public to stand up in solidarity with the people of France, it's right that we take an approach of solidarity with them. The Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have talked of the importance of achieving consensus in our response to the attacks and achieve a common objective in trying to defeat ISIL.
Jeremy Corbyn was quite nervous during this speech in the House of Commons. He coughed a bit, spluttered. He wasn't sure of himself.
He sounded quite hesitant, didn't he? And his narrative wasn't anywhere near as clear as the Prime Minister's narrative. He was going back and forth on important issues, not to be negative about what he said, but he talked about preventing cuts to the police force, something that's a concern to a lot of people. He talked about diversity, multi-faith communities. He talked about refugees, all very important issues. But you get the feeling that from the Prime Minister's perspective, that entire statement was about airstrikes on Syria.
And what is more, Sheila, is that, as Jeremy Corbyn admitted in the House of Commons, he'd seen the statement beforehand, so there was no excuse. If you needed to respond to the statement, he should have responded to the statement. Instead, he went off on various different tangents and didn't actually focus in on what was being debated.
Praising ambulance workers fulsomely for some reason.
Jeremy Corbyn is...
Different audiences.
Is a law unto himself at the moment, I think.
All right, thanks very much, Theo. Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor. We're listening to all of that with Sir Gerald Howarth, Conservative MP for Aldershot and former Defence Minister. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Sheila.
Are you pleased with what the Prime Minister said?
I'm not sure I'm pleased, but I do welcome the fact that the Prime Minister has been very robust, and he has been very analytical in his response to what has happened in Paris. I think it's important, though, to recognise that Paris is but the latest in a series of atrocities which have afflicted capitals across Europe and, of course, in the Middle East as well. So whilst this, as your political editor said, might be it might be a game changer, I'm not entirely certain that it is that much of a game changer.
Paris, you mean?
Yeah, Paris, yes. But what I think may well happen is that, as you have rightly acknowledged, the Prime Minister was emphatic on the need to act. And looking around the opposition benches, a number of Labour MPs, particularly on their front bench, were nodding in agreement with that. I think there is a greater recognition now that these airstrikes that are proposed make sense. Those in 2013, quite different circumstances, didn't entirely add up. The Prime Minister has said that he's going to set out a strategy. That is what we need, because we will not achieve the elimination of this evil by military means alone, but military means, as he set out today, do have a role to play, and it does not make sense for Royal Air Force aircraft to be striking ISIL assets on one side of the border and then stopping at the border. I think that it is entirely logical that aircraft should be tracking ISIL targets in Syria as well, particularly in association with Russia. And I very much welcome the discussions which the Prime Minister had with the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, yesterday.
You mentioned Russia. I've just noticed news just coming in that Russia is offering a £33 million reward for information leading to the arrest of those responsible for downing that passenger plane over Egypt, because confirmation came in this morning, didn't it, that they had found evidence of explosives on board that plane. Talk to me a little bit, if you would, about Russia's position in all of this. It was interesting when David Cameron was talking about those other non-military moves, more money for refugees, particularly in Turkey, co-hosting a donors conference in London involving countries like Germany, Norway, Kuwait and others. He accepted there are big gaps between us and Russia. How do they fit into things now, do you think? What's your assessment of that?
Well, I sense the Prime Minister has shifted his position. I said to him about 15 months ago that as far as Assad was concerned, I was a heretic, that I'd met the leaders of the opposition, very, very disparate group, and wasn't particularly impressed with them, and did not believe that they could that they presented a credible alternative government. I think that we have to talk to Assad, not least because he is being completely supported to the hilt by Russia. Russia is an important player in this business, and resolving the Syrian civil war is going to be a key component to dealing with this evil that is ISIL, because this is the ground in which they are fomenting not only dissent and evil there, but also that is the base from which they are operating around the world. They're attracting our own people from this country. So I think that getting together with the Russians is good news, and I hope it will be a way of breaking the ice with Russia anyway, because, of course, Russia has its own Islamic fundamentalist threat, so we have common ground there.
Do you think that reward serves any purpose in all of this, or is it just, in a sense, a sop to Russian people that he's doing something about their loss?
I would think that it probably is actually quite a good move, because there will be people who can be bought. I mean, in Afghanistan, we know the $10 Taliban, the people who for $10 a day would take up arms. So I think that it may well attract some people to come out of the woodwork and own up to what happened. And obviously, we've only just today learned that what we suspected now has been confirmed. That will, of course, enable us to address this. But I think, look, you rightly said at the outset, the Prime Minister said we need a full-spectrum response. He said basically that composed three parts: military, which we've discussed, counter-terrorism, and he talked about strengthening our counter-terrorist capability, not least by
adding more staff,
increasing our network of counter-terrorist experts around the world, and the narrative at home. And I think this is an important point about the narrative at home. Jeremy Corbyn was attacking people who were expressing Islamophobia, and one understands that, and of course one doesn't wish any harm, of course, to Muslims in our country. To the contrary, nevertheless, it is a fact that the people who are perpetrating these crimes are doing so in the name of Islam. They're not Sikhs, they're not Hindus, they're not Jews, they're not Christians, they are Islam, and they are Islamic fundamentalists, and the Muslim community in this country has really got to get a grip of it. We have people who are being brought up in British homes, who are going to our schools, being taught our values, and then signing up to a barbarity of medieval proportions. Something has gone wrong in their society, not ours.
OK, thank you. Sir Gerald Howarth, Conservative MP for Aldershot and former Defence Minister. In light of that final point that he made, in a sense, save your responses on that till 2, because we're going to talk about the response from the British Muslim community and that text that was sent to women in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, or certainly part of it, suggesting they stay indoors for the time being in the light of the Paris attack. We'll talk about that from 2, whether that's good advice or bad advice, good thinking or bad thinking. For now, I want to know who you are with when it comes to Syria, extending airstrikes into Syria. Are you with David Cameron or, as far as we know at the moment, Jeremy Corbyn? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. It's 18 minutes past 1.
This EC.
With Hampton by Hilton, where hot breakfast and Wi-Fi are included with every stay.
Well, David Cameron has just said a lot in the House of Commons, but central to what he said was that he's going to bring back the question of whether we should bomb inside Syria, bomb Islamic State targets inside Syria, especially Raqqa, its putative capital, its headquarters, essentially. The city of Raqqa is just a bit larger than Greater London. And he said in the House of Commons today, that is where plots against us are being made, in this city, and it is not right that we don't join forces with those who are trying to defend our country and protect our safety. Do you agree with him? Or do you agree with Jeremy Corbyn's statement so far anyway? I mean, he made it clear he will listen to what the Prime Minister has to say. But do you agree with Cameron or Corbyn when it comes to whether airstrikes inside Syria are now the answer? 0345 606 0973 is the number to call. Text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Robert's call from Dulwich. Hi, Robert.
Hi, Sheila. I'm just so incensed by everything that's going on. And I really believe that, Cameron, when he speaks, he just shows the utter contempt in which he holds the average person. It's just a tenure-ship for him before he moves on to the next thing. You can't dictate foreign policy and strategy on the basis of one attack. I accept, of course, that when events happen, sometimes you have to make adjustments, of course. But this isn't news. The propaganda videos from ISIS have been saying for a year now that they're going to send waves of terrorists across with the refugees. There have been voices in our own political system warning against the problems that open borders face. And here we are. The great solution is going to be, well, we're going to allow our jets to cross an imaginary line drawn on the map on the other side of the world. It's just so dishonest. Why aren't we? There's only one thing we need to be discussing now. Okay, first of all, because you can't beat ideology by bombing, right, you have to go to the root cause of it, and you have to cut off the funding. And no military campaign has ever been successful where they didn't have the funding and equipment, right? The army marches on its stomach, and the bottom part.
Well, David Cameron did essentially say the same, and Jeremy Corbyn mentioned the funding and mentioned the arming, and that he would want that to be part of David Cameron's presentation to Parliament. He also mentioned the root causes and the ideology. It's just that militarily, he believes that also needs to be on the agenda, bombing Syria.
Well, we've been, look, at the moment, the Russians, the French and the Americans are bombing Syria and have been doing so for quite a while. And those are three very powerful air forces. Okay, fine. If the English want to join in, I'm not going to say no. I mean, it's not going to get what you want, which is we have to stop the ideology being perpetuated. And what that means we have to ask ourselves who are really our allies in that part of the world. And the fundamental questions aren't being asked. And that's why I maintain that the people who are leading us, I don't think they really care. Look at the French. They've said that they've attacked overnight, or was it last night, military, arms depots and control centres for ISIS. But what have they been attacking for the last 6 months? There's a game going on. The truth of it is there's a proxy battle being fought in Syria between the Americans and the Russians. And what we should do now is we haven't got the stomach for these wars anymore. We're too liberal lefty in this part of the world. Leave it to the Russians. If you left it to the Russians, ISIS would be gone within 6 months.
All right, Robert. Thank you. Robert in Dulwich. Kevin in Hampstead. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Sheila.
Who are you with, Cameron or Corbyn?
Well, no one. I've got my own opinions, and I'm intelligent enough to be able to see through the propaganda and whatnot. It's all incredibly convenient. 8 days ago, or 8 days before the so-called attacks in Paris, France already had their fleet of ships in Syria ready to start attacking them. It's so convenient.
Well, they've already been attacking them, though.
No, I know, but while I'm saying, we've got to go to war with them now, they were already there. This is all the same stuff as 9/11, 7/7, which were never, ever investigated properly. And I know that for an absolute fact because I've actually spoken to the person who was carrying out the terror drills that day. And I found out who his client was. And there has never been a single mention of who his client was that day.
Oh, well, sorry, are you suggesting that Paris did this to itself?
It's all very, very convenient.
Are you suggesting that Paris did this to itself?
Paris didn't do it to itself.
Who
None
did?
of these things happen.
Well, who did, Kevin? You're presenting yourself as an expert on anti-terrorism, or on international terrorism, I should say.
No, I'm an expert.
What are you saying exactly? I don't understand what you're saying exactly.
It's all very, very, very convenient.
That's not an answer to my question. What are you saying about the Paris attacks?
It all seems like a setup to me. Same as the Charlie Hebdo thing, which has been admitted as a staged drill. And the same day...
What do you mean a staged drill? There were 11 or 12 people killed in Charlie Hebdo.
OK, well, look here, there was a drill going on that day, which the French military and special services were carrying out. Same on 7/7, same on 9/11, and then the other day they had drills going on which were the exact same situations as what we were told unfolded.
I'll leave Kevin's words hanging in the air. You can make of them what you will. Who are you with when it comes to Syria and the possibility, again, for a vote in Parliament on striking the RAF, British forces striking inside Syria? 0345 606 0973. Do you agree with David Cameron that the time is now? Or do you act more carefully and think perhaps we need to be more careful? That's the word that Jeremy Corbyn has used a lot in recent days. Cameron or Corbyn? 0345 606 0973. Text 84850 or tweet at LBC. More of your calls on this in a few minutes, and we'll put that question as well to the London Labour mayoral candidate Sadiq Khan. You're listening to Sheila Fogarty on LBC. It's 1:30.
1 till 4 on LBC.
David Cameron, about an hour ago, went to the House of Commons and gave a statement ostensibly about his trip to Turkey and the G20 summit, but it was clear that the central message from it was that he intends to set out his case for airstrikes in Syria again and bring them to Parliament. Jeremy Corbyn gave his response. Let's get the response now of Sadiq Khan, who is the Labour mayoral candidate for London. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
What did you make of what you heard in the Commons, first of all?
Well, I think that the Prime Minister set out some of the things that we'll have to consider over the coming weeks. We already have British planes which are involved in attacks in Iraq. I think the Prime Minister said there's been 350 targets attacked using British planes. We're already supporting Allies' action in Syria, but I think the Prime Minister, in a very sober statement, talked about the need for him to come to Parliament with what he called a comprehensive strategy to persuade MPs from all parties, by the way, about why he thinks we should be considering bombing Syria as well.
Were you satisfied with Jeremy Corbyn's response?
Well, I'm afraid I've been out and about, so I didn't see Jeremy's. I saw the Prime Minister's response, but you know, the point is that we need to make sure that we have a proper debate in Parliament. You know, France this weekend, for understandable reasons, decided to attack camps in Raqqa. We know what's happening in Mosul as well, and we need to make sure all options are on the table. Well,
let me just tell you a couple of the things that he said. He did focus on important things, but they seemed odd things to focus on, given that the central question was about Syria. But anyway, he did talk about fears of a backlash against the 2 million Muslims who live in the UK, something we've spoken about on this programme before. He talked about the duty to refugees that the UK still has, and didn't want that to be dented in any way because of events in Paris. Would you echo both of those things?
It goes without saying. I mean, the central concern actually most Londoners have, and I'm going to the football tonight like 80,000 people, is to ensure that we as a city are safe. And one of the most important functions of the Prime Minister and the government, but also as the current mayor and the future mayor, is to make sure we're safe. That includes security of ordinary Londoners. And of course, there is a separate issue about reprisals post the horrific bombings on Friday. But you know, London shows the world that post 7/7 there weren't reprisals that people feared. We came together and we didn't allow these sick, evil terrorists to divide our communities. In fact, there was non-Muslims coming out and saying, you know what, I know Muslims as mates. I work with them. I'm married into the family. Don't believe in this sort of stuff that these terrorists are doing, which I think gives me confidence.
Yeah, I had those experiences as well with Muslim friends, and they were all very positive, but it hasn't been everybody's experience. I don't want to overstate it, but it certainly hasn't been everybody's experience. Just a couple of examples on that count, actually. We're going to report more in just a moment on this attack on a Glasgow mosque.
Yeah.
And also, after two, speaking about a text that was sent, not from the central office of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, but certainly from one of their regional leaders, I think, to a number of people, a text saying, amongst other things, female members should avoid going out to public places and be vigilant. Now, that feels like bad advice to me. What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, look, there are incidents where there have been Islamophobic attacks, there have been reprisals, and there's been, inverted commas, a backlash. But look, you know, if you just think it through, what is the raison d'etre of a terrorist? It's to kill and to maim, but also to disrupt our way of life. And my view is a very simple one. If you stop using the tube, stop using the buses, stop conducting yourself in the way you have before the attacks, then you're allowing them to win. Now, I don't say this because I'm some sort of martyr or hero. I've got family members who wear the headscarf. I've got family members who don't. But if you change the way you conduct yourselves as a direct consequence of what happened in Paris on Friday, then arguably, we've managed to change the way we conduct ourselves and live our lives because of what they've done. And I'm not willing to let them do that. I'm going to football tonight. I was out on Saturday talking to people in London, knocking on doors, delivering leaflets. I was on Sunday going for a jog around the Common. I'm working today, and I'll be working. Karen working. We can't allow them to succeed.
Well, it's interesting you say that, and I agree with everything you've just said there. But in this text, it also recommends that men and women, or any Muslim people who spread the message of Islam on stalls with leaflets. You mentioned you were out leafleting with stalls, leafleting in classes in mosques. Suspend that for 2 weeks. And again, women not to go to public places. Would your message to whoever sent that text be, don't do this?
Well, I'm afraid my delivering of leaflets wasn't as noble as the community. It wasn't religious leaflets, it was Labour Party leaflets. But what
would you say to them? It just seemed, when I was a teenager, this was Irish terrorism. And if my mother had stayed at home, that would have sent a very odd message to me, wouldn't it?
Yeah, look, my daughters, I've got 2 teenage daughters who I love and adore, and they asked me the question, should they still go out on Saturday? And I said, of course you should. Of course, you should be vigilant and be prudent and be sensible. I'm the least reckless person you'll find. But actually, you know what? Don't change the way you conduct your lives. Don't change what you wear. Don't change what you're doing and stuff. Because if you do, they're disrupting our way of life. I mean, that's why I think it's fantastic that nobody's seriously talked about cancelling the European Championships from France next year. They should go ahead, of course, or this year rather. They should go ahead in 2016. Nobody should talk about cancelling tonight's match. I think it's great. I'll be singing at one national anthem tonight, but 2.
I'm quite jealous.
In Cockney French. I mean, listen. I hope that the screen has up in big writing and stuff. But I think it's going to be great.
I think that's a given, isn't it? I think. Can I ask you?
That's the great thing about London, by the way. We're a beacon for the world, and I want the rest of the world to see the images today. And if you're a nervous Muslim, if you're a nervous London, hopefully this will give you better confidence when you see us, watching the football tonight.
Yeah, and cohesion is all about mixing, isn't it? Can I ask you just a couple of quick questions before you go? If you were London Mayor at this point, what would you be wanting from the Met now, especially on things like shoot to kill? Your own leader has said he is not happy about the idea of shoot to kill, who is, I suppose. But where would your view lie on that? Shoot to kill, yes, in mid-fight, not when someone's only a suspect. Sensible approach?
There are roughly speaking 2,000 officers in London who are, allowed to carry weapons. The training they go through is intense and it's enormous. And if you speak to them, and I've done so in the past, when you pull your weapon and you use it, you're trained to think about saving as many lives as you can. Your intention isn't to cause problems. And in that instant reaction, they're thinking about the job, and that's keeping us safe. And so, as a lay politician, I'm not going to tell them how to do their job. They've received the training. There are guidelines. They understand the importance of the right to life, but also they understand that what they're doing is saving.
But as mayor, you'll have to have a view. As mayor, you'll have to discuss with them whether shoot to kill is right in cases like Paris, for example.
Of course, listen, of course it is. I mean, it goes without saying. Look, let me see what I'll do as mayor of London. I'll make sure we've got sufficient police officers in London. And what the most senior police officer in London is saying, that he's really worried about a spending review that could lead to us losing up to £800 million over the next 4 years, which means up to 5,000 police officers. It makes us less safe, not more safe. The police officers who are trained to use weapons should be able to use those weapons as they're trained to do so. And that means, I'm afraid, on occasions they'll shoot and people will die. And we've got to accept that, But actually, I'd rather have 2,000 police officers doing that than having an armed police service. And that's really important. And there's a big difference between me and other politicians. But also, our police officers do a really hard job. It's such a hard job. And so, the idea that we tie their hands and restrain them even more, okay. Of course, there should be checks and balances. It's not something I'd do as Mayor of London.
All right. Thank you very much, Sadiq Khan, London Labour mayoral candidate and MP for Tooting as well. Let's talk briefly to our reporter Rebecca Williams, who's LBC's reporter at the scene of that fire I mentioned in my conversation with Sadiq Khan, the fire in a mosque in Glasgow. What can you tell us, Rebecca?
Hi there. Well, this fire has actually broken out overnight at a cultural centre in Bishopbriggs, which is about 10 minutes outside of Glasgow. We do know that it is commonly used by Muslims in this area, but not just Muslims, I might add. Police say that they are investigating. They're not treating it as a hate crime at the moment, but they are looking at this as one line of inquiry. And, there's police guarding just outside just now. I went and had a look around earlier before they arrived, but they won't let me back in just now. But you can see where they've kicked in the back window. There's burns along the floor where it looks like lighter fluid was used, or maybe a petrol bomb was maybe thrown in and it's gone off, and the glass is smashed. There's broken chairs, there's burned books. And none of the doors were locked when I arrived and tried to open it, so it looks pretty abandoned at the moment.
All right, thanks very much, Rebecca. Rebecca Williams, LBC's reporter at the scene of that fire in Bishopbriggs, which went up in flames this morning, in the early hours of this morning. You're listening to Sheila Fogarty on LBC. The time is 1:45. More of your calls in just a sec.
From the LBC Travel Centre
on LBC.
The Prime Minister has said in the House of Commons this lunchtime that he will present a comprehensive strategy, is how he described it, a comprehensive strategy on how we should tackle Islamic State. It's clear that central to that will be increasing our attacks into Syria and bombing the city of Raqqa. I've been asking how many of you support David Cameron on this and how many would support Jeremy Corbyn's, so far anyway, more cautious response. 68% of you on our Twitter poll say you support David Cameron. 32% of you say you support Jeremy Corbyn. Sarah's called from Tooting. Who do you support, Sarah?
I support Corbyn all the way, and I'll tell you why. The reason why I support him is because we're all up in arms about what's happened with Paris, and it's dreadful what's happened with Paris. It's absolutely awful. However, what's going to happen about all the other people in Syria who are innocent, who are being dragged into all of this, who are trying to flee away from all that's going on there? Everyone's up in arms about Paris. What about Palestine? How many children have been orphaned in Palestine? I can't even begin to count.
What would you like to see done instead, if not these attacks on Raqqa? Which it's worth saying are already happening anyway, just not us, just other people.
Right. But also, can I just say, why is everyone hating on Islam? Why is everyone pointing fingers to Islam? It is not the religion. People need to understand that. It's
but Sarah, is it Sarah or Sarah? Apologies, I don't want to mispronounce your name. Is it Sarah?
It's Zara.
Zara.
Z-A-R-A, yeah.
Zara, which people are pointing fingers at Muslims and at all of Islam? Because David Cameron and Jeremy Corbyn made it clear that's not the case in both their speeches.
Yes, okay, now, the thing is, we have people who are educated, who know the difference between extremism and people who are genuine practicing Muslims. But we have those people who just jump on the bandwagon, who just say that, yes, they're scum, their Allah is this, their Allah is that. I've seen so many posts on Facebook, Twitter, and, stuff like that. And I've seen some people, like, on the street. My friend's daughter was spat on in the street because she wears a hijab. For goodness sake, when are people going to actually open their eyes and understand that extremism is extremism?
All right, Zara, thanks for your call. And the point you raised, we are going to talk about in more detail after 2:00 here on LBC as well. So thanks for your call, Zara. Let me just tell you some breaking news from West Yorkshire Police. They say that it's an awful story. 24-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of murder after 2 young children were stabbed to death in Bradford. That's from West Yorkshire Police. We'll bring more of that story to you a little later. Joe's call from Chestnut. Who are you with on the question of how we tackle Islamic State, Joe?
Hi, Sheila. I am with the side of common sense, which would be Jeremy Corbyn. When Cameron originally mentioned bombing Syria, when was it, 2013?
Yeah.
He wanted a bomb Assad's troops to help the rebels who have now turned into IS and run riot everywhere else that we've destabilised. There's already French, Russian, American airstrikes going on in Syria. We've got airstrikes going on in Iraq. What we really need to do, we're allied forces, let them get on with that out there, focus on what we've got going on in this country. My serious thing that I think should go on is it the Wahhabi faith that's being perpetrated through Saudi Arabia. Many of our mosques in London and across the country and the madrasas are run by this branch claiming to be from Islam.
So you'd rather see more work done in the UK on counter-terrorism?
It has to be done. I think it's not just counter-terrorism. I am a white English person. I don't have a heritage to any other country apart from here. I don't hate anybody. And the thing is, people are being told, don't go outside because you may get spat on.
Well, David Cameron did say we are already and will continue to tackle both violent and non-violent extremism. To quote him, he said, those that sow the poison, they're in his sights as well. So that work is going on, according to the Prime Minister.
I think the poison is very subtle, though. It's the thing about being different.
All right, Joe, thank you. I want to hear from Ollie in Maida Vale now. Hi, Ollie.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. You're not with either of them, you say. Tell me more.
I think not only these attacks on Syria, we can keep bombing and particularly finding these areas where ISIS are controlling. But I think, we need to go to the root of the problem, and we can't allow Muslims to hide away. The community of Muslims in the UK, especially in our nation, should go out and show that they're not with this ISIS. They don't hide away. Show them that we're not with ISIS. They're not with us. I know that it's happening a bit more and more, but it should be happening on such a massive scale.
Is there anything that ordinary people like you and me can do to facilitate that for Muslims and for people of any faith?
I have friends who unfortunately would change carriage if they saw someone who looked who had the Muslim clothing on or looked suspicious, and usually, unfortunately,
or looked suspicious to them. To them.
Yeah, to them, to their eyes, to the way the media's percepted them. The Muslim community have to stand up for themselves and show that they're not with ISIS, because ISIS, their goal was... But
also, Ollie, isn't it our responsibility to tackle our fear if we're moving train carriages and the like?
Absolutely, but unfortunately, it's happened. These Muslims, they're not Muslim. They are...
The terrorists.
They're terrorists. They're unhumane terrorists, and they dress up like an average Muslim, and to the average person's mind, that does put into every average Muslim who wears a burqa or who covers their face that, hold on a minute, I'm going to move carriage because that's what the last person who bombed, such as the bombings in London, looked like. So
the thing is, Ollie, I understand what you're saying about Muslims need to make it clear that they are part of us and they're no threat to us, and they certainly don't support, those who don't support Islamic State should say so. But how often, how many times a day? I'm just thinking again, and I know I mentioned this a bit, but I'm thinking again when I was a kid and the IRA were bombing other children up the road in Warrington and in London and Birmingham and other places. Nobody told me to go around apologising for the IRA.
I think it's a different situation. They are killing in the name of a religion, and but ISIS. I've seen this written down. I've seen it posted by ISIS on the internet. That their aim is to separate Muslims and the rest of the world.
All right, Ollie, thank you. I want to hear from Alan in Sutton. We've had our two previous callers before Ollie, both supportive of Jeremy Corbyn's more cautious approach. I think I'm right in characterising that way than David Cameron's. Alan in Sutton, who are you with on this?
I think Cameron more so, but I think he does need to be careful about how he goes about it. I mean, logistically, I think there's a danger that you could finish up with the skies full of multinational jet fighters, relatively uncoordinated. So I think, as you've mentioned before, to some extent, Allied forces are already involved.
It would have to be, it seems to me now, it would have to be some kind of deal with Russia as well, wouldn't it?
I think you're absolutely on point. I mean, obviously by proxy, that means some sort of agreement at least
All right, Alan, thank you. Thanks very much for your call. That's Alan in Sutton, who thinks that David Cameron's approach is the right approach. 67% of you now in our Twitter poll on this agree with David Cameron's approach. 33% of you agreeing with Jeremy Corbyn's. Let me just read a text to you, or part of a text to you, that was sent to members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in the Midlands yesterday by one of their regional leaders. They suggested that people keep a low profile, essentially. That would be the best way of describing it, including female members avoiding going out to public places to be vigilant. Is this bad thinking or good advice?
On FM, online, on your mobile.
You go to the LBC website now, lbc.co.uk, or look at our Twitter feed at LBC. You will see the full text of a short text that was sent to some Ahmadiyya Muslims yesterday in the Midlands. It was one of their regional leaders that sent this text, in which he suggested that people keep a very low profile for the next few weeks, including women members being told to avoid going out to public places and to be vigilant. Now, we all need to be vigilant, and I suppose some people will have decided not to go to the cinema or not to go to the shopping centre, if that's what they mean by public places. But is this good advice? Is this common sense? Or is it bad thinking? Is it anti-cohesiveness, social cohesion? For those of you who don't have access to a computer or a phone and can't see it either on the website lbc.co.uk or on the Twitter feed at LBC, let me just read exactly what it is so that I represent it fairly. I hope and pray you are well, it says. Please suspend all tabligh, I hope I'm saying that right. That means spreading the message of Islam in stalls, leafleting and classes, in mosques as well, for 2 weeks. So suspend the spreading of Islam for 2 weeks. Please also provide manpower for security in mosques. Please ask all able-bodied men above the age of 18 to provide duties. Keep me informed. Female members should avoid going out to public places and to be vigilant. Now, some elements of that advice are perfectly sensible. It's, I imagine, things that the Jewish community have done in cities like London and others in the light of attacks on Jews, having security at their mosques and at their public events and such like. But this particular advice for female members to avoid going out to public places, what do you think of that? Good advice or bad thinking? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. We only found out about this text because we took a call from Dure, who told us about the message that she'd received.
We have been told, I'm sure other communities have also been told, that to remain vigilant. We got a text message, I think in the weekend, saying that don't go out alone. There's also been a video posted.
You got that from where? Where did you get that message from, Dure?
From our communities, our own community. They give advice that women should not be going about alone. And I'm not surprised, because there was a video just showing, I don't know if you've seen it, a lady at a train station who just got pushed into a train. That's just been put on. This is what we're afraid of.
Well, that was Dure, and you could hear the tension in her voice when she talked about what she's afraid of. But is this good advice, to stay close to home, to not go to public places? Rafiq Hayat joins me, National President of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Sheila. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and thanks for joining us. Now, I know that this advice wasn't centrally disseminated, was it? This has come from an individual.
That is correct. I mean, the thing is that this particular advice has been a personal advice by one person who has decided to include it. I mean, as you mentioned, that it is sensible that during these difficult times, yes, we do make sure that, we have security at our premises, which I think just is a sensible precaution.
And you do. The one in London where I went to interview your leader, there was security there.
Absolutely. And I think that is true across the country. It's not only mosques. I think you'll find all public buildings have that amenity. And the thing is, because, we have volunteers who come and assist, so really I think the message is just directed at volunteers to come and help out as additional security during this difficult period. Other than that, no such instructions was given for women not to go out. My own daughter, she's a teacher. She's out in her school today teaching. So, and people are going about their daily normal life. So I think it's just somebody who has, without authority, issued that on his own accord, so which is not correct.
Yeah, I think it's an understandable response. I just don't think it's a wise response.
No, indeed. I mean, it's nothing. This is not the response that the community has given, and it's certainly not a response that I would give. I think our women should just go out in their normal routine duties. Of course, everyone has to be vigilant during this period, and, things do happen, but I don't think that stops people from going about their normal daily life.
What about things like the dissemination of Islam? For example, those stalls that you see out and about. The suggestion, again, is to suspend those for 2 weeks.
Sure. Let me just read you a message that the head of our community has given out after the incident. He said, on behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community worldwide, I express my heartfelt sympathies and condolences to the French nation, its people, government, following the heinous terrorist attack that has taken place in Paris. The brutal and inhumane attack can only be condemned in the strongest possible terms. I would also like to reiterate that all forms of terrorism and extremism are completely against the true teaching of Islam. The Holy Quran has said that to kill even one innocent person is akin to killing all of mankind. Thus, under no circumstances can murder ever be justified, and those who seek to justify their hateful acts are, in the name of Islam, are serving only to defame it in the worst possible way. Our sympathies and prayers are with the victims of the attack and all those who have been left bereaved or affected in any way. May God Almighty grant patience to them all, and hope to pray that the perpetrators of these evil acts are swiftly brought to justice.
I think we can all, most people listening would support those words wholeheartedly, Rafiq Hayat. Can I ask you on a more practical level?
Sure.
About not just Muslims' response and not just Muslim women's response, everybody's response to this. I'll tell you what one of my first responses to Paris was, over the weekend anyway, not immediately as I saw the events unfold, but was to contact a very good friend of mine who's Muslim. We used to work together. She's a journalist as well. And I said to her, do you know what? I really feel, I've been thinking for some time, we need to do something here. We need to, because I'm a person of faith as well, and so is she. And we have Jewish friends who are, and other Christian denominations, and clearly people of no religious faith as well. And I said, why don't we have some kind of event all together, get some publicity for it, invite people to it, and get just a small way of presenting some cohesion to the people around us and anyone else who cares to look, because I felt the need for that to happen.
Sheila, I totally agree. And in fact, we are doing exactly that this Friday. We did that last time when there was the Charlie Hebdo affair, and even before when the burning of the Quran. All of these we hold, as you know, you've been there, we hold a session with different communities, Christians, the Jewish, the Hindus, the Sikhs. All of them come to our mosque. We firstly offer a silent prayer for the victims. And then secondly, all of us, we strongly condemn what is going on, and we speak with one voice.
And they matter. They obviously matter, and they nourish the people who go to them. But I'm talking about something more public. Now, that's clearly one part of the response, but it won't be everybody's cup of tea. It won't be everybody's wish to do that kind of thing.
Of course.
What practical things would you say to people, to Muslim people perhaps specifically, about what actions to take now if they feel that they should take some kind of action, not staying indoors and hiding away, but taking some kind of action?
I think people, I think the thing is that I've lived in London since the 1960s. London is one of the most cosmopolitan, tolerant cities in the world. And all the people here, I think we saw after 7/7 that people of London showed great tolerance, and there was no reaction whatsoever. So, to be honest with you, as a community of Londoners, we should all speak with one voice, and we should condemn what has happened in Paris. But at the same time, we should show that we are going to lead our normal lives and be out there doing our normal work. And that is one way of showing people who wish to divide our society that we're not going to allow that to happen.
And do it with one another, not just in small little satellite groups. Rafiq Hayat, thank you, National President of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community. This text that I mentioned, as I said, you'll see it at lbc.co.uk. I've just tweeted it as well on my Twitter feed at Shelagh Fogarty. Zainab received it. Zainab, hello.
Hello.
Hi, you're in Wembley. You received this text from a number of people, did you?
Yeah, I received it multiple times. I received it at least 3 times.
Okay. And what did you feel when you got it?
It was a completely natural response to what had happened. I mean, I received the text about 3 different times advising to be vigilant, not to go out, especially during the aftermath of the Paris attacks.
And were they from friends forwarding it on to you, or did you know the source of it?
No, I don't know who the source of it was, but I know it was friends who had forwarded it on to me, and I know that it was friends who were telling me about an experience of a girl in East London who had a bottle thrown at her by somebody in a racist attack. So based on that, they formulated this message advising people not to go out in this time.
Are you going to follow it, that advice?
Well, no, I haven't technically followed it since I'm out of my home, and I went out yesterday as well. I haven't followed it, but I do understand the meaning of it, and I do understand that for a lot of women who are afraid of, being subject to racist attacks. I live in Wembley, which is possibly one of the most multicultural places in London. So for me, going out, it's not something that I'm going to say, I'm really afraid or whatever. But even my close friends have told me they've been subject to being stared at quite a bit on public transport and things like that, and it's quite an uncomfortable, tense environment for a lot of people to go out. So even though I don't necessarily agree with the fact that women should be told, stay at home, the purpose of it is to sort of, in case they might be subject to any racist attacks. So with that, I understand it. My only thing about it is that this whole sort of situation, this idea of, Muslim communities should be doing more. I don't really understand what exactly people want the Muslim community to do. They say, ISIS claiming Islam, they're doing it in the name of Islam, the Muslim community needs to do more. We don't have any links with ISIS. The majority of the moderate Muslims living in the UK, we don't know who ISIS are. We don't have one-on-one contact with them. So people have gone on Facebook, people have gone out in public and said, yes, we denounce what's happened in Paris. Okay, so what else the thing is, how they say, it's a problem of the Muslim community. The people who did the bombings in France, the people from the UK fleeing to Syria to join ISIS, they were born and raised in the UK and France. They're a mix of 2 societies, not just one.
All right, Zainab, thank you. Zainab in Wembley. She received the text. She isn't particularly adhering to the advice in it to stay away from public places, but she understands women who might, Muslim women who might. If you've been on the receiving end of these kinds of attacks, first of all, I'm absolutely appalled that you have been, but let me know what that was like and how it affected how you go about life, because nobody should be told that they should stay indoors. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call to talk about this. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Was a Muslim organiser right to send a text telling women to avoid public places? 16 minutes past 2.
From the LBC Travel Centre, I'm Chris Humphreys. The clock...
If you can, go to lbc.co.uk or have a look on Twitter at Sheila Fogarty or at LBC, and you will see the text. It's not long, just the text of a tweet that was that was sent out to various Muslims around the country, it would seem. Initially, I thought it was just in the Midlands, but we spoke a moment ago to someone from Wembley who had received it. And amongst other things, it suggests that women avoid going out to public places in the light of the Paris attacks, Muslim women. And I'm asking whether you think that's bad thinking or good advice. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Let's hear from Mahmood in Putney first of all. Is it good advice, Mahmood?
I think it's sensible advice, Shelagh. I think that, my wife and my family, we actually travel to Paris whenever we get the chance, in the holidays, once a year at least. And we've noticed a palpable difference since the Charlie Hebdo attacks. My wife, more than me, in fact, has she always mentions to me, she says, things have definitely changed. And she's always talking to me about the way people look at her now, because she wears a scarf, she's dressed quite modestly and decently when she goes out. And she's, she has noticed a palpable change. I mean, right now she's out at the moment, or she'd be speaking to yourself. She's actually out in Kingston at the moment. But the thing is that she's noticed that things have changed, and so therefore, if things are pretty hostile out there, I wouldn't want my wife or my children to be subject to any of that sort of abuse.
Of course you wouldn't, and none of us would. But you're talking about the atmosphere in Paris. What about here in the UK?
Well, yes. I mean, the last time we came back from Paris, she did say, I don't want to go back there because of what I've just described to you. But since then, here in the UK, she has also noticed, and this is actually going back a bit further. Actually, I think she has noticed, and I have noticed, sort of a difference in the way people look at you, and also, especially the women actually get the brunt of it, because obviously, they have a scarf on. So if they looked at me, they may or may not.
And if anyone's dishing out its abuse, if anyone's going to dish out abuse, they're cowards, so they're going to go for somebody who's more vulnerable than themselves, probably.
There is that as well. But what I would also say to you is that, everybody talks about the fact that, the onus is on Muslims to call out these extremists and these people, that are actually do not represent Islam. That's fair enough, but I don't think enough people are saying that, those people who are in authority and who actually have a sway over public opinion, such as politicians. There was the guy from Aldershot, that MP from Aldershot. I think what he said was absolutely crazy.
Sir Gerald Howarth.
Yeah, I mean, how can somebody, an MP, say something like that? I mean, to be quite honest with you, he's a politician, so I don't expect anything.
Yeah, for people who didn't hear it, he said, this is your community's problem, not ours. And I thought that was off beam, because we all live in the same community, don't we?
Absolutely.
Hopefully, anyway. And those who don't, why not?
No, but the thing is that he should call that out, and the onus is on him as a member of Parliament, and especially a place like Aldershot, which is the home of the British Army. He should call out the racists and the bigots and the right-wing extremists that sort of even those under the cover of UKIP. I mean, there are plenty of people. Nigel Farage, Nick Ferrari's best mate. Nick Ferrari. He should know better than to sort of foment the flames.
Can I ask you, Mahmood, because I want to talk to Mariam in Barnet in just a second. Can I ask you just quickly to finish? You are a member of the Ahmadiyya community, from whence this text came. Not from the central office there, but somebody amongst you decided to send this text and suggest it to women that they stay indoors. You've talked about your wife and about the freedoms that you want her, and rightly want her and any daughters of yours to have. But is there any possibility that you would suggest they keep a lower profile at the moment?
Absolutely, I would. I mean, like I said, I'm a realist. I'm not going to put my family in any sort of risk, and especially, like I say, when journalists...
But translate that for me into actions. What you said, she's out shopping now, so she's out shopping in Kingston. Cinema, theatre, daughters going out to the cinema.
She can go out and do whatever she likes, but she's got to take appropriate precautions. And there are a hardened group of right-wing extremists out there that go under the cover of EDL, UKIP, whatever you want to call it. And I find these people in my workplace sometimes, that they actually, have a hostile attitude towards you in the workplace, and they also, and it's becoming more mainstream, unfortunately, and that's the problem.
Mahmood, thank you. Mahmood in Putney. I want to hear from Mariam in Barnet now. Hello, Mariam.
Hello.
What do you make of this text?
In regards to the text, I don't actually... I haven't received the text myself, but I took my own precautions because after what happened in Paris, I just felt my heart sink because I knew I had to get on the train on Monday wearing my hijab, and I was just afraid of the stairs and how people were going to react to me. So that to me was heartbreaking because I feel like I'm a Londoner. I've lived in the UK since I was 8 years old, but I've never had a problem. But I feel like now there is a little bit of discrimination, and at the same time I understand where people are coming from because they're afraid. But it's not fair to judge everybody in what the terrorists have done, not Muslims. These people are terrorists.
You have a friend who was caught up in Paris.
Yeah, and I was saying to your producers that it's sad because, unless you wear hijab, someone may not know an individual's faith. And my friend was actually caught up in a crossfire in Paris, and she is Muslim. And that's why I say that ISIS are terrorists, because if they weren't terrorists and they were just targeting other people, they target everybody. They don't just target individuals, they target everybody, and that's what makes them terrorism.
And it clearly wasn't just Muslims in pretty much any attack away from the Middle East. It was never just Muslims who were killed. Mariam, how is your friend?
My friend actually died in the attacks, and this is why I'm even shaking speaking about it, because for me, it's just so... I feel rage, I feel anger. I feel anger because they use the name of Islam to do what they do, but yet hurt human beings. It doesn't matter of your faith, we're all human beings and we deserve respect. And I don't think that it's fair. Like, the whole thing just makes me really emotional. And this is speaking as a Muslim. I'm embarrassed because, but at the same time, I'm like, they do not define Islam. These people do not define Islam. They define their own faith. and whatever else they're doing, they're not in my name. And I put that in my status on Facebook and said, not in my name, because I believe in Islam and I'm a Muslim, but what they represent is not my Islam.
Where was your friend caught up in all of this? And I'm so sorry to hear she died, Mariam.
My friend was caught up in the cafe, and it's just a normal... I have family in Paris, so when this happened, I was calling everybody and being frantic because it's places that my family members would have attended, but yet we're Muslims. You see, this is why I want some people that don't quite understand what's happening and want to blame it on a whole religion of people. It's like blaming all Christians for what the Ku Klux Klan do. You cannot do that. They have their own ideology of what they think is appropriate.
You're absolutely right that anyone who would blame just a Muslim for this is absolutely out of line. But you do understand that unlike the Ku Klux Klan, Islamist terror is very much and repeatedly adhering attaching itself, I should say, to Islam. Not your Islam, but to Islam. Yeah. And that's the key difference, isn't it?
Yeah, it is that. But at the same time, I think many Muslims will tell you they're embarrassed. Because at the same time, it's like, I feel the pain. I cried. In my workplace, one of my colleagues actually lost also a very good friend, because I actually work in a association that I actually deal with the Paris division. So for me, it was very raw what happened.
Of course.
And it's just very, the whole thing is sad. And I think you'll find that a lot more Muslims are hurt by what has happened in Paris and are sympathetic to what's happened in Paris. But I just ask people not to taint everybody with the same brush, because there is a lot more of us that are good than are bad.
Mariam, thank you very much for your call, and my sympathies to you, Mariam, in Barnet. Talking about the fear she felt on Monday morning, getting onto the tube, getting onto the train to get to work, talking about the loss of her friend in Paris who was shot dead in one of those cafe shootings, and a colleague lost a friend in Paris as well. Just awful, and just awful if it makes anyone, but British Muslim women in particular, we're talking about this hour, if it makes British Muslim women and British Muslim people, good people, feel that they have to somehow shrink into the shadows because of this. That, I think, would be the worst thing that they could do. Was a Muslim organiser right to send a text telling women to avoid public places? 0345 6060973. More of your calls on that in a second. And we'll talk to the Muslim MP, Khalid Mahmood, about whether these texts should have been sent or not. You're listening to Shelagh Fogarty on LBC. The time is 2:31. We're talking about a text that's been sent out by some member or members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. If you're not familiar with them, the Ahmadiyya is a sect of Muslim and an offshoot of Islam, I should say, but it's not recognised by Orthodox Muslims as being true Islam. Some regard it as heretical. So you could argue that they're in greater danger, the Ahmadiyya, than other Muslims. You could argue that. I'm just asking whether this text, which amongst other things suggests that women should avoid public places and be vigilant, is sensible advice or bad advice. Social cohesion has to be more important now than ever before, or certainly as important as ever. So was a Muslim organiser right to send a text telling women to avoid public places? Richard's called from Hemel Hempstead, and Shamila is on the line from Harrow. Shamila, if I can start with you. You are a British Muslim and you got this text.
Yes, I got this text, and just to sort of clarify, I'm not from the Ahmadiyya community. I'm just a Sunni British Muslim, and I've received a few texts actually, so not just one. And actually, while I was on the phone, I got another message from somebody, I don't know who it is, was saying that a couple in Scotland has been attacked by 15 people. So these messages haven't just started coming, they're always coming. We're always being told to be vigilant, and this has been happening since 9/11.
But do you know, Shamila, who they're coming from? Because if I had texts coming from... No idea. Well, that's worrying, because if I had texts coming to me, telling me how to live, telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing, I'd want to know who they were from, and I'd want to know why they were sending them to me, because if you don't know who they're coming from, it could be somebody who genuinely wants to sow fear in you and sow the kind of social unrest that assists terrorism.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's not just that, but there's the warning side of it. So there are people who are trying to say, oh, this attack took place, that attack took place, so you should be more vigilant. Now, the problem is that obviously there is going to be a scaremongering aspect to that. Now, just on Facebook yesterday, for example, somebody posted up, oh, Zara has banned anyone from wearing hijab to enter the store. So there is that kind of paranoia, that scaremongering.
I doubt whether Zara has done that, to be clear, on Zara,
exactly.
The company.
No, totally. And I agree with that, and I think it's completely unfactual. But I think people do tend to blow things out of proportion. But at the same time, I do think there is Muslim women, especially the ones who wear hijab, are very, very fearful because they are outwardly showing that they are Muslim, and they're going out and they're being looked at, they're being stared at. If I wore hijab and went out, I remember after 9/11 I did that, and I was spat at. Because I was wearing a hijab and I was one of them or whatever. So
let me bring... Stay there, Shamila. Let me bring Richard in on this. Richard, you wanted to comment on the question of people staring at Muslims, particularly Muslim women, because they're easier to see as being Muslim.
Yes, I'm afraid when the lady asked what can a Muslim person do, the first thing they can do is forgive me for staring. When I'm in that situation and I feel that the perceived risk of what has been stereotypically fed to me by the media of where the risk is, I am going to stare for a while to work out, if doing a risk assessment, if my safety is in jeopardy. And either I'm going to feel comfortable and then look away, or I'm going to remain concerned and continue to keep an eye just to make sure that I feel safe.
And what are you looking for when you look at a woman in a hijab?
Well, the problem with the ladies is obviously they wear headgear, and if ever you feel threatened by someone, if they smile at you, that can take quite a lot of that away, because someone that's gotten to mean you harm wouldn't normally smile at you.
Oh, you're talking about women in the full niqab where their face is covered.
If you've got the thing on your head, you can't see someone's face, and it's very hard to read someone when you can't see their face. But just no other way, even people without the headgear. And if I saw the perceived risk of, say, someone sitting on a bus with a rucksack and they fit the profile that I've been fed and that I'm worried about, any body language from that person that is friendly and is not what I would consider not sitting in the corner, withdrawn, staring at looking like they're in another world, not engaging with anybody else on the bus. Not that I'm saying you need to talk to everybody on the bus, but anything to make that my assessment of what I think you are, a risk or not, is going to help and maybe not scare you.
Let Shamila come back on that. Comment on what you've had there.
No, I think that's dead right. I think absolutely 100%. That's something that I've been saying for absolutely ages. Is there are Muslim women who can feel very intimidated, so they'll feel nervous, they won't want to make any kind of eye contact, let alone smile. But it is those little things, isn't it? It's about being friendly, showing, actually, I'm going to make eye contact, or I'm going to show you that Muslims are friendly people. We're good people, we're open people, and we want to, we love community cohesion as much as any other person who is not a Muslim. And I think the Muslim community has to do a little bit more, but I don't think it should be put on the Muslim community to somehow resolve this issue, because we're not going to be able to do it without the support of everyone.
And we all have to make sure that we're relating as well as we can to everyone who crosses our path, don't we, Shamila? Thank you to Shamila in Harrow, and thanks to Richard as well. Asif's call from Walthamstow. Hello, Asif.
Yeah, you're right. I wanted to talk about what you said about that note that got the text message that got sent around. Basically, there's been a few incidents already since Friday where Muslim women wearing hijab have been bottled, have been thrown into the road onto oncoming traffic. That was in Leighton yesterday. Obviously, my mum, my sister, they wear a hijab. When I heard about that in the morning, my mum had an appointment. I made her cancel her appointment because obviously I'm worried about my mum. Cool. I hate these people. My family hate these people that are doing all this. But unfortunately, there are Muslim people that hate these people, but they're suffering. They're taking the punishment. Women are getting thrown into oncoming traffic. I don't think that's right. I wouldn't want that to happen to my mum.
Of course it's not. And Asif, what are you saying to your mum and to your sister about that?
I told them what happened. I forwarded the text message. Then I called my mum because I'm at work. And
well, hang on, Asif. Another text message. Tell me who these text messages are from.
What? The text message.
The text message that says
getting thrown into a road.
Yeah. Who's that from?
They're just from. That was from my friend. Obviously, he's forwarded it on. I forwarded it on.
Do you know where he got it? I'm just trying to establish the truth of it. You see, I'm not doubting you for a second. I'm just saying there seems to be an awful lot of texting going on within the Muslim community, and you know as well as I do that it's important where these originate from.
Yeah, but you see this thing that happened in Leighton now. Cool, that's the other things I don't know about, but the thing that happened in Leighton, because I live in Walthamstow, that's literally next door, and somebody phoned me and told me as well, one of my mates, that this happened last night, and they was there not long after the scene. So these things are actually happening. It's not like it's just a rumor. It's actually happening. So we hate, like me, I'm a Muslim, I'm born and bred in London. I've lived in London all my life. I've got a bed. I'm at work today. It's not cool. I might be getting a few funny looks, but no one's saying nothing. But with the women now, if a woman's on her own and she's wearing a hijab, she could be assaulted. She could be anything. She could even be spat at. Do you know what I mean? And if that was your mum or your sister, you wouldn't want that to happen. Absolutely. But she hasn't done anything. She hasn't. She's not doing nothing. She hates them people.
I understand that, Asif, and of course I understand the fear you must feel and they must feel if that's happening in the community around you. But I hope you understand as well when I say these text messages, I'm curious now about Muslims getting text messages to say this has happened, that's happened, the other's happened. It probably has. It's probably people just trying to keep their community informed. But you can see how it's an open door for abuse. Just texting fear, spreading fear through texts. You can see how that could happen very, very quickly. And this text from the Ahmadiyya, or an element of the Ahmadiyya community, suggesting that people keep a low profile for at least 2 weeks, more security at mosques, that perhaps more understandable, certainly given what's happened in Glasgow today. But the element that struck me yesterday and strikes me now today again, now I have the full text in front of me, female members should avoid going out to public places and be vigilant. Good advice, bad thinking. You can see how that is open to abuse by people who just want to sow fear and sow division. 0345 6060973 is the number to call to talk about this. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. It's 2:46.
Weekdays 1 till 4 on LBC.
So interesting. I started the programme talking about one particular text. Then lots of you rang in and said you have received it too. It's a text sent by one element of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community yesterday, suggesting, amongst other things, advising that women stay indoors, or to be specific, avoid going out to public places. Masuma has called from Romford to tell me about this, to tell me what she thinks about this. Masuma, what's interesting is people are saying they've got this text and others. There's almost like an internal reporting system going on here.
I don't think it's so much an internal reporting system. I think it's been a bit blown out of proportion, if I'll be honest. I think social media, this is what social media does. Social media, text messaging, etc. Naturally, there's a bit of a panic. And I think it's just people sort of trying to look out for one another. So it'd be the same as if there was any other sort of, same as if there was a sale on, or same if there was a party going on.
You can see how it's open to abuse, can't you?
Well, yes and no. So to be honest, I feel like you're picking a little bit, saying that we're sowing sort of fear and division, and
Oh, I'm not saying I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying you are, and I suspect that the majority of people who've sent and then forwarded them on are doing them for the very reasons you've just described. I'm just saying that it is open to abuse.
Yeah, but then again, nobody questions the bigger picture. So this is, I haven't received a text message myself, but maybe my friends have, and maybe it's a matter of time until I get it, but I've seen some information on Facebook and I've heard of incidents that have happened since Friday's events. But the point is, nobody questions. I mean, you're saying, do you know who it is? And that's a bit scary. Somebody's telling you how to live, what to do. Again, I don't think that's what they're trying to do. Nobody's telling you how to live. They're just saying be careful. But rather than see the positive, everyone's trying to pick on the negative. Nobody questions the authenticity of the media information, but yet they want to question a text message, which is probably, a lot closer to home than something you read in the paper.
Well, I would question the authenticity of any message that was sent to me telling me what to do, to be fair. Yeah. And I suspect a lot of men and women would as well, of any persuasion, of any religious persuasion. Well, can I narrow you down to the staying in?
If it didn't apply to me, I would probably a bit more. I am a British Muslim, and if someone said, be careful, there's a bit of, there's problems going on, or women are getting attacked, then maybe not so much. And again, I'm sure, maybe I don't know who sent it or who was the first person who wrote this text, but likely it's going to be sent to a friend of a friend of a friend. So the last person who sent it to me, possibly I may know. But I'm a British Muslim. I live in Romford in Essex, and I constantly feel like I have to justify and defend myself. And sometimes I overcompensate, or other people overcompensate. Maybe I talk about the issues that are going on when I don't need to, because it's a bit like the elephant in the room. People might say, "Oh, did you see hear what's happened on Friday?" And then I kind of feel like I've got to, make sure. Hold up.
Yeah, which is a shame, because like anyone else, you sometimes won't want to talk about it.
No, I don't. I'm done talking about it, because it's an ongoing battle, and I can't change everybody's views and opinion. Well, everybody's entitled to their view and opinion, but I constantly feel like it's just always up in the air. I'd rather talk about the kids at school or what I'm going to cook for dinner, but this is always lingering. I mean, I listen to LBC in the mornings, in the evenings. My daughter gets in the car and she's 5, and she'll say, "Mum, they're saying this about the Muslims, they're saying this about the Muslims." Now, how do you explain that to a 5-year-old?
And who's saying what to her? Who's saying these things to her?
Oh, no, she might just hear it on the radio. That's what I'm saying, LBC or something. She sees the news. We avoid that as much as we can, but it's all around us. It's all around us. It's everywhere.
No, I understand. I understand. My first...
I go to school to pick her up, and I'm probably one of 3 mums who wear a headscarf. So we do stick out. Not saying everybody's rough or mean or abusive, not at all, but I shouldn't have to worry about what they might be thinking.
No,
but
you
I am.
shouldn't. Yeah, well,
I mean, it's funny enough, I've just put myself up for parent governor, and I'm absolutely worried that my chances of getting it are probably slim. And again, I could be completely wrong. Maybe other people.
I hope you are wrong, and good for you for doing that, because involvement, visibility, it's all of that, making friends, it's all of that is going to help with cohesion, and it's more important than ever, I think. Fatima, thank you very much, Masuma in Romford, and Fatima's call from Brent Cross. Oh, Fatima, apologies. We'll talk to you in just a moment. I need to go live to Charlotte Wright, LBC's reporter in Paris. France has called for a European-wide response to Islamic State, saying its allies should support it in its battle against Islamic State since these attacks on Friday night. Charlotte, what are you hearing on the streets of Paris?
Well, Sheila, I've been talking to people here to find out what they make of these airstrikes, and what they make of the call for other countries around Europe to get involved in these as well. And there's a little bit of a confused picture among a lot of them. A couple of issues came up when I spoke to people. The first is around whether France should be conducting airstrikes at all. One woman that I spoke to summed it up quite well. She said, "I'm not sure if it's right, but I need someone to do something about what happened on Friday." And, an event like Friday's attacks is bound to provoke a passionate response and an instinctive, urgent need for action among a lot of people. The second issue, though, is the support from other EU countries, and people I've spoken to who support the airstrikes say it's vital that other countries like the UK get involved to bolster France's effort. Well, let's have a listen now. This is what a couple of the people had to say to me about the subject earlier on today.
Yeah, because I think it's not the problem of one or two countries. I think it's a problem for the world in general, because Daesh is a problem for all. In all countries we can have attacks. In all countries we can have lost people and others. And I think have a solution in this part of the world with some culture and most of ethnies. I can't have a solution with one or two countries enough to have the values of all the world.
I think that violence is not the answer in this issue. I don't really have a solution, but I think education is a big part of a solution. It's the problem here is the ignorance of others' culture.
And Charlotte, I mean, that's the very thing we're talking about this hour. And Charlotte, as you prepare to leave the city now, leave Paris, what's your sense 4 days on as to where people are at with this? It'll be a very individual thing, I suppose, but the city, the mood there.
Yeah, I think, it seems now, compared to Saturday when I was first here, there's much more. Life is happening now. People are going about their daily life, and I suppose that the difference is that this is a weekday as well. But people are going to work. There's construction work going on just down the road. There's bin men are coming and collecting the bins. It's kind of things are moving on, but there are little pockets where you can really see that sort of those moments where people just want to stop and reflect about what happened. And I'm just standing actually back at a couple of the restaurants that were attacked on Friday, and there are crowds of people here. There's dozens of people still coming here and bringing flowers and looking at the candles, and it's sort of just a reminder when you get away from the general hustle and bustle of the streets, when you come to areas like this, you sort of think, gosh, yeah, something really bad happened here on Friday, and a lot of people are still suffering here in the city.
As they will for some time, I'm sure. Thank you, Charlotte. Charlotte Wright, LBC's reporter, who was on the streets of Paris for us throughout the weekend, throughout the last 4 days, bringing us some great reports and some great insight into people's responses there. Thanks to Charlotte. I want to talk this next hour about the announcement in an interview that he gave on American television from the actor Charlie Sheen, who has revealed that he is HIV positive. There'd been an awful lot of speculation about it over the years. In fact, he says he's shelled out millions to keep the thing a secret, but released himself from the prison, as he called it today, and revealed that he is HIV positive. Why did it matter in this day and age?
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation with Shelagh Fogarty. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Shelagh Fogarty. Weekdays 1 till 4 on LBC.
Imagine having an illness, but an illness that is now thankfully extremely manageable. Imagine being world famous and having that condition, and still feeling, in the 21st century, still feeling that you have to pay people millions of pounds to keep it quiet. That's what Charlie Sheen has been experiencing for the last 4 years since he was given the diagnosis of being HIV positive, and he's revealed that fact today. I was surprised that it was regarded as such an astounding piece of news in this day and age, but maybe I don't know enough about this. If you've revealed that you're HIV positive, what was the reaction? Have a listen to what Charlie Sheen said in an interview to NBC's Today Show.
I'm here to admit that I am in fact HIV positive, and I have to put a stop to this onslaught, this barrage of attacks and of sub-truths and very harmful and mercurial stories that are about that threatening the health of so many others, which couldn't be farther from the truth.
Let's not forget, this is a man dealing with addiction as well as dealing with the onslaught that he talked about there. It made me think again back to things like Rock Hudson. The movie star, tall, beautiful, handsome movie star, who, after he died, it was revealed he died of AIDS, and he revealed, or it was revealed posthumously, that he was gay and that he'd lived a double life in order to protect his image. Well, Charlie Sheen, thankfully for him, is in a different era and has shaken off those shackles today in that interview with NBC's Today Show. But am I kidding myself if I think that the days of it being a scandal are over? What happened in your life when either somebody declared to you that they're HIV positive or you had to tell it to your friends and family? 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. What does the Sheen interview say about our attitudes to HIV? We'll put it up on the LBC website shortly, lbc.co.uk. Let's talk to Sarah Radcliffe, Policy and Campaigns Manager at HIV Aware. Good afternoon to you, Sarah.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. Good news that he's done it.
I think it's good news that he's used this opportunity to be, to educate people and to be very positive about his health at the moment. But I think it's really unfortunate that he felt blackmailed and pressured into this position, especially with sort of speculative reports last week. He didn't really have much of a choice.
He's been bullied into it, has he? Do you think? He's been bullied into it, do you think?
I think he has, and I think he's making the best of it now. So I definitely applaud him for the way he's spoken in such detail about how it's affected him to be threatened with having his private medical information made public, and how he is dealing well with his health now, and how he and his sexual partners, are staying safe and everything's fine. But I do feel like what we're seeing here is a really high-profile version of what lots of people living with HIV still experience when they get their diagnosis.
If people didn't see those headlines last week, it was just talking very, scandalously and gossipy, the Hollywood star with HIV, pushing and pushing and pushing until he revealed it. And when I was reading the transcript of his interview and listening to short excerpts there, what struck me was, I have minuscule health issues, the odd thing that you get by the time you're in your late 40s. And they have no shame or disgrace attached to them. They have no controversy attached to them, but they're also nobody else's business but mine.
Exactly. It isn't anyone's business except your own. But yet for HIV, people do seem to think it's their business, and not just when it's someone who's really high profile like Charlie Sheen, but we hear from people living with HIV all the time who, in a work situation, in a social situation, people seem to think it's their right to know someone's status, and it's just not the case. And it should be that people feel comfortable talking about HIV, but the reason they don't is because of these sorts of reactions. It would be great if everyone could just be open if they felt like it, or not if they didn't. But there's such a stigma still attached to HIV. Despite
Diana, despite all the campaigns, despite people clearly living great lives with it.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that we're still having to push on this. But I think even the fact that Charlie revealed today that, he was diagnosed when he was hospitalised with an illness. That's something that happens all the time in the UK with people who, if they'd, been talked to about HIV in a constructive way, may have got tested earlier. They might not have felt ashamed of going for a test, which I can see must be the only barrier if you do get to the point of illness before you are getting tested, lack of awareness or stigma.
And insurance policies. I had the test because of an insurance policy I was getting out, an employment protection insurance.
Okay, yeah, and things like that do previous policies around insurance and how tests could affect it, I think, put people off a bit as well. Really, the key message is anyone can test for HIV on the NHS. It's completely confidential, and it should be something which is just a normal thing to do. All the discussion around the speculation last week made it sound like you have to do something particularly strange or dangerous or devious to be someone living with HIV, and it's just not true. And I think that the more we have open conversations about it, the better. And hopefully this will be the start of those open conversations. This time of year, it's 2 weeks to World AIDS Day. NAT is going to be asking people this World AIDS Day to rethink HIV. And I think this is just further illustration of the fact that we do have a long way to go.
In a way, going back maybe 40 years, I suppose, 30, 40 years, cancer was a funny disease in those days in terms of how people spoke about it, because the word had a resonance that people feared. And it probably still does a little, but less so.
That is true. I feel like we have moved a long way in terms of cancer. It did take several decades, but we've had HIV's been around and known about at least for 3 decades, and we still are stuck in the past in terms of the discussion. So I think now that we, at least in countries like the UK and the US, it's a long-term manageable condition, we should be talking about it in that sense. But I think partly the history and also the fact that, it is associated with being a sexually transmitted disease. It is fundamentally, at least in the UK, that's how most people acquire it. I think that might be some of the root of the stigma, but that's not something that, we should be ashamed of, and it should be okay for someone to just say, yes, I'm living with this condition, I'm managing it, and that's my business.
And he made it clear in the interview that had been, he's obviously getting help and seems to be on the mend, from his point of view, that he was a long-term drug user and that he suspects that's where he contracted the illness.
I think it was interesting, though, that he did say he couldn't precisely pinpoint how he acquired HIV, and that's the case for him. And also, probably quite a helpful thing to say, because I think sometimes there's an assumption that everyone, that one knows when they've acquired HIV, or someone knows when HIV has been transmitted, when in fact, if we knew, we wouldn't have a quarter of the people living with HIV in the UK undiagnosed. I mean, if people actually were very aware of when this happened, it wouldn't be such a public health issue as it is. So I thought it was quite interesting that he spoke frankly, but also he was honest about it. He clearly didn't have an inkling that he was living with HIV until he went to hospital.
And talked about freeing himself from a prison. That's very sad, isn't it? That keeping that secret, and he paid for it. He ended up having to fork out millions, he says, to stop people revealing it. I mean, that's disgraceful, isn't it?
Yeah, it really shouldn't happen. I think the sort of speculative reporting that happened last week I think it showed why he felt like he needed to do that. But it is just sort of on a larger scale an illustration of what some people do experience, where they do open up to someone about their HIV positive status, and it's treated not as just some medical information, but it's as a moral judgment or as a comment on their character. That just isn't. It's a virus, and that's all there is to it. So it is really sad that he felt so blackmailed. It's
interesting that in the interview he talked about his sexual partners and how he'd gone on to tell every one of his sexual partners about his diagnosis. I wonder where that is where most of the disapproval about HIV still resides, in the idea that somebody has it and might not tell their sexual partner.
We do definitely get a sense at NAT that there's a perception that if someone knows they're living with HIV, it becomes almost entirely their responsibility to be the person that prevents HIV transmission at all. Of course, he acquired HIV himself, but it's sort of once someone's got the diagnosis, they're often treated as the sole responsible person. I think also there's sometimes a misunderstanding about how infectious someone is, for example. So what was really helpful, he doesn't have to talk about his medical information, but as he did, he helpfully explains that because he's on HIV treatment, his viral load is so suppressed in his body that the chances of him transmitting HIV would be extremely low anyway. And he's had medical advice, and he brought his doctor on, so that was quite a positive thing he did, even though it was a very personal thing for him to talk about.
Sarah, thank you for talking to us. Sarah Radcliffe, Policy and Campaigns Manager at HIV Aware. What do you think Sheen's interview says about our attitudes to HIV? Rebecca has called from Harrow. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi. I'm just ringing up, obviously, because we're talking about the HIV with Charlie Sheen. I just feel like that it's almost being made light of because of his status. I mean, HIV is a virus, correct, but it's also a life-threatening virus. People may not die immediately, people may not die within a month or two, but they eventually will die of the disease. And I feel that people...
Well, they might not. They might die of something else. They might get cancer. They might have a heart attack. They might get run over in the street like you and me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I agree with you what you're saying. Then people, every time you step out of your front door, you are at risk of something. But I'm saying that people who have the virus need to make people aware, and people will say, like, oh, it should be confidential, example. But, I feel like people need to tell others that they have it. I mean, have a little card in their pocket. Because if someone was to have a nosebleed, or if somebody was to fall and cut their leg, if you was to go over and help, and people are saying, oh, they can't tell everyone, you can't tell everyone. You are then, in fact, at risk of catching it if you have so much as a paper cut on your finger.
Yeah, but that's not what this is about. Well, I understand the point you're raising there, Rebecca, but for a start, you get the diagnosis. The only people you need to tell, and I think are morally obliged to tell, are people you intend to have unprotected sex with.
I don't agree with that, because if you was to go to, your doctor would know, but if you was to go out in the street and you was cut on your used vehicle and you needed first aid, are you not obliged to tell the people, the first aiders, the people who you come in contact with on a daily basis? Because if you do come in contact with you, they are then at risk.
Are you talking about paramedics and the like?
No, I'm just talking about first aiders, like myself. I'm a first aider, so I work in childcare. So if I was to see somebody on the floor having a fit or something, I could help them. But if they don't tell me they've got HIV, and you're saying that they shouldn't have to, then I then am at risk myself.
So you think in the way that a diabetic, for example, has a card on them that says, I've got diabetes, you think the same should be true for people with HIV?
I feel like, it is an extremely, extremely important topic, I believe that, that it's come on such a long way from people like getting HIV and dying. Like, do you remember Mark from EastEnders? Like, he had it, and like it was just like his whole life was over. It had come a long way.
All right, Rebecca, thank you. Rebecca raising some interesting points there. Rebecca in Harrow. What do you think Charlie Sheen's interview says about our attitudes to HIV this day and age? And do comment on what Rebecca said as well. Do you think that, as in diabetes, people should be encouraged to carry a card that says they're HIV positive in case they're ever in a serious accident and you might want to help? Do you think that's something that should be considered as well? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC, and I'll let you know when the interview with Charlie Sheen is up on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk. 17 minutes past 3.
On LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, where hot breakfast and Wi-Fi are included with every stay.
What does Charlie Sheen's interview, in which he has revealed that he's HIV positive, what does it say about our attitudes to HIV? It looks as though he's only come out and said it because he was essentially bullied by international media talking about, which Hollywood star is HIV positive. Do we need to know? Does it matter to us? Does it only matter to people in his circle? 0345 6060 973. I'd love to hear your stories of revealing to your friends and family, and maybe your employer as well, that you are diagnosed as HIV positive. What was the response? You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Always remember, on issues like this, you don't need to give your real name or location if you don't wish to. Simon has called from Tower Hamlets. Hello, Simon.
Hello.
You're a paramedic, so I'm guessing you're calling in the light of our previous call from Rebecca.
Yes, I am, yeah.
Go on.
Well, this, HIV, it's quite a difficult disease to catch. People kind of make out that you can catch it from kissing and spitting and tiny cuts and stuff like that. That's kind of not, how this works. And I think if someone has the attitude as a first aider that if someone's having a fit or has a slight cut, they would be concerned and treating them is quite a concern. As you know, there's lots of campaigning for HIV and AIDS and stuff, and people are always being tried to be educated on this. So it was quite a concern to hear that someone from a first aider point of view would be concerned of treating somebody because they didn't know their status.
Tell me about that then. Tell me how you would handle that situation.
How I would handle it?
Yeah.
Well, in my job, we always wear gloves.
Yeah.
Every patient we come across, we wear gloves, not just to protect the patient, but to protect us as well. That's just how we work. And if I felt the need to, yes, I would ask them if there was any medical problems I need to be made aware of, because I'm always protecting myself. If they told me if they didn't tell me, then I'm protected anyway. If you know what I mean.
Mm.
So I just think, especially in that sense, if you're a first aider and it's just a slight cut or something like that, they don't need to say, "Oh, by the way, I'm HIV," because you should be protecting yourself with gloves anyway.
And what about mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? If there's if there's blood involved in an accident, or
first aiders, they always have like these protection things that they put to do mouth-to-mouth. We don't do mouth-to-mouth because we have other equipment, but for a first aider, they should have equipment with them, like a face mask or something that they're provided with.
So is that the kind of thing that police officers routinely have as well, like a cover for the mouth with a little pipe into it?
Yes, yeah. From what we've seen, yes.
And you would use that as well, would you, for your own safety?
Of course we would.
Yeah, I mean, these are they're great examples to hear. These are real sort of frontline examples, but in the normal life of a person, it's clearly still a difficult thing to reveal, isn't it, in some people's experience?
Yeah, definitely, yes. It's not something that you want to be broadcasting because it's your medical conditions and your medical and you don't, make them public. You don't have to make them public as long as you're sensible with it. And like I said, it's all about, it's not that easy to contract. Yes, if you've got cuts and stuff, but you're not going to be putting cuts against cuts. This is how it was coming across with this lady.
All right, Simon. Thank you, Simon in Tower Hamlets. Alberto's called from Collingdale. Hello, Alberto. You're live on LBC. Hi.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Hi, good afternoon. This is Alberto here.
Hello there.
Hi. It's just with this, HIV situation, I think there is a lot of miscommunication and, taboo about it. We've been public already, my wife and I. I've been married to my wife for 20-odd years. My wife is HIV positive. We, sometimes have sex without protection. And on these 20-odd years, I have not been infected. We got 15-year-old son, which was born by cesarean section, and he's not infected either. So when, it comes down to, for example, first aid, I used to be a first aider as well, and it's you need a huge amount of blood to actually get infected with HIV. When I'm saying a huge, is, it has to be a substantial amount of blood, as well of, if you have a cat in your hand, you actually have to put your cat into the blood stream so the blood gets mixed. And, again, I'm not saying that having unprotected sex is safe. That was my choice. I mean, I will say to anyone that they should actually use a condom, regardless of whether the other person is HIV or not, for their own protection. And, there have to be precautions taken, especially when the other lady was saying about the first aid. It will be easier for you to get hepatitis B or C than HIV, and that has been proven.
When you say, Alberto, that you and your wife have from time to time had unprotected sex,
we haven't used a condom.
Why do you make that decision? And did you take medical advice before you did, or are you both just happy to risk it?
No, I haven't taken any medical advice. That was my choice to show that I actually care for the person, for who she is, not for what she has. So I made the choice to be with my wife as the actual priest that married us until death do us apart, and I vowed by that. As I said, we've been married for 20-odd years.
And how do you feel? How do you feel when you see somebody like Charlie Sheen being pushed into revealing it like this?
Well, he's also made some choices on his life, and I think they were the bad choices, not using contraception or using condoms, and using drugs and stuff like that. That actually increases the the possibility of you getting infected with HIV.
But somebody might say you're making a bad choice, Alberto, by not being...
But that's my choice.
Well, that was his. That was his choice.
I'm not going out there infecting anybody else. That would be a very bad choice, to actually knowing, unfortunately, my wife was infected on her first relationship with a man. He knew he was HIV positive. He chose not to tell her. So he actually infected her when she was 16 years old.
Oh, dear.
So, when back in Spain, that was nearly enough when HIV came out, she was given a 10 years life. Luckily, as I say, we've been married for 20 years.
And there have been great medical advances since then as well, haven't there? Alberto, thank you. Alberto in Collingdale. So, he's decided to continue to have unprotected sex with his wife, even though she is HIV positive. Charlie Sheen says he has told all of his sexual partners about his HIV and has revealed it to the rest of us today in that interview. What do you think the manner of him having to give that interview in the first place tells us about where we are with regard to attitudes to HIV and AIDS? More of your calls on that in a few minutes, and... Can't be many of us who haven't heard that a few times in the last 4 days. England fans are being encouraged to sing the French national anthem, La Marseillaise, at Wembley tonight as England play France. We'll speak to someone from one of the 9 faith movements who'll be attending that match. You're listening to Shelagh Fogarty on LBC. The time is 3:31.
On LBC.
I've always thought that was a fantastic national anthem, and now I think it even more, having heard it endlessly over the last few days, for obvious and understandable reasons. Prince William has hailed tonight's football match between England and France as a powerful message of unity in defiance of the threat from Islamic State terrorists. He is there, or he will be there. The Prime Minister is going to go there. We heard from Sadiq Khan as well. I'm sure there'll be as many people as possible in the public eye who want to go, who'll be able to go. Alex Goldberg joins me, chair of the FA's Faith Group, who'll be attending the game tonight with 9 other faith group heads. Good afternoon to you, Alex.
Good afternoon, Sheila.
Tell me a little about your role and their role in the event tonight. I imagine in the warm-up there'll be some reference to this.
I don't know. The FA's trying. I mean, obviously things are happening pretty quickly, and we were supposed to go anyway. So it's also an act of solidarity and a recognition of the work that we do. And I think, given in the light of the attacks on Paris, the work we do is bring different faith communities together through sport. So we have Rimla, who is head of the Muslim Sports Women's Federation. We have somebody from the City Sikhs Network who works with Sikh kids. And we also have Maccabi GB, which is a Jewish group, and also the head of Sports Chaplaincy UK, which is a Christian group. But what we've also been doing in the last 3 years at Wembley is bringing Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh and Catholic and Anglican schools together over a 1-year programme where they learn about each other, they learn about each other's faith, and also they play a bit of football. And it's identity through football. But I think that's what tonight's about. It's you were telling your listeners about how much you like the French national anthem. Yeah, and of course the words are, some of it's quite bloodthirsty, obviously, but the actual word is citizens to the arms. And I think this is our modern response. We are arming ourselves by being together, by being in solidarity, and also interacting together. And that's our form of citizenship. I think the fact that we're gathering tonight at Wembley, and we seem to be joined by more and more political leaders and even members of the royal family. Obviously, Prince William is president of the FA. That's not that unusual, though, is it, in the big games? And I know this is just a friendly, but it's changed now. Yeah, I think it's taken a whole new level, given the poignancy of it all. But it's not all that surprising, the big games. I think what will be surprising tonight is that 40, 50,000 England fans will be singing the French national anthem. Well, they'll try. We will try. They'll try, yeah. I mean, I tweeted the French lyrics, and there was an English translation going around as well. But I mean, people will do their level best if they don't speak French to have a go, I'm sure. But it is. But the thing is, they'll want to have a go because we want. Sometimes things are bigger than sport, and the fact that this game has been organised for a long time. The fact that the French players are very keen to play it, the fact they're trying to show normality in the face of adversity and atrocities is huge. This is very close to home for me. I lived in Paris for 4 years. The attacks happened near where I used to live. One of my friends left the bar just 10 minutes before his bar was attacked in the street. Yeah, so he shot up, and as are many people that witnessed. You hear eyewitness accounts, and he's one of them. And so this is very close to me, and close to also my family who are educated in France. I've been given an extra ticket, so my son's coming along tonight. He's very pro-England normally, but this week he has a slight mixed loyalties, having spent 4 or 5 years. He's quite young. But it's great to hear. It's great to hear the work that the FA Faith Group is doing with those young people from different faith backgrounds and and sort of coalescing around, the sport itself and matches like tonight, as you rightly point out, sport is a huge, sort of human glue, isn't it? Even though it's competitive. We are sometimes allowed to take the FA Cup in and around schools in London. We bring schools together, and even if they have ethnic, even if the schools are predominantly, we bring them together, are from one religion or one ethnic group, when they meet with other schools, it's new for them. But when we bring out the FA Cup, it's like a national treasure and symbol that everybody can identify with. Ditto the World Cup, but I haven't got hold of that yet. Do you think this is one occasion, Alex, where Abide With Me might not get a look in? I know it's a hymn, but I'm actually a Jewish chaplain, but I actually like the song Abide With Me. If the Chief Rabbi's listening, sorry, but I like it. He's not listening. He's always on Radio 4, don't worry, he's not listening to us. Thanks, Alex. Alex Goldberg, chair of the FA's Faith Group, who will be attending the game tonight, along with 9 other Faith Group heads, as well as the Prime Minister, and Prince William will be there as well, and many, many thousands of fans who will, I'm sure, will want, in whatever way they can, to belt it out for the French. Some news has just come in, is that the first Syrian refugees to be rehoused in the UK, those who've been allocated places from camps to the UK, have just arrived in Glasgow, in the city of Glasgow.
We've been talking about what Charlie Sheen's interview, in which he reveals he's HIV positive, says about our attitudes to HIV. It looks as though he was bumped into it and bullied into it, you could argue, by press reports in the last week or so. What does it tell us about where we're at with this particular illness? Is it still one that's surrounded by stigma and fear and nods and winks? Helen in Hampstead, do you think it is, Helen?
Well, from what I've been hearing, yes, I do. And I'm actually quite shocked by it. I'm a healthcare professional, work in a busy London hospital. And, I mean, there was a lady on, I think, a couple of news before I've come on, and she was saying about carrying cards with your identity of your HIV status.
Rebecca, yeah.
Yeah, I found that quite shocking. I mean, as where I work, I wouldn't dream of even considering asking anybody what their HIV status is. I don't need to know it. The only time, when we treat people, we use something called universal precaution. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I haven't.
It's something we use in the healthcare profession. It's where we treat every single patient the same, and those standards should be of a high enough standard that we are not putting ourselves or the patient or anybody else at risk.
But what about people in the street who might end up helping somebody who's bleeding profusely or something like that?
Well, the thing is, that's fine, but are you going to stop, you're rushing into an emergency, are you going to stop and say, oh, by the way, what's your HIV status? I mean, and if they say I'm HIV positive, what are you going to do? Does that mean you're not going to treat them? What do you do? There isn't gloves around. This is in the middle of the street. Is it actually, can we do anything about it if they tell us?
You're going to help them, aren't you? Yeah.
Of course you are. That's what shocked me, I think. This lady had first aid. Where you do that course, I know some people have to do it for their work, but you do that course because in case you're needed to help somebody. And I find it's quite disturbing. I'm more, as a healthcare professional, I'm more worried about hepatitis than I am HIV. That doesn't even come on my radar, to be fair with you, because the risk is so minimal to me.
And what about hepatitis? Remind us what the risks are of that.
Hepatitis is very, very infectious. It's not a very nice thing to catch if you do get it. It's high risk. We have to be immunised against it. You can't work in the profession unless you are immunised. And so a lot of people don't know they've got it. And it's not very nice, and that's more worrying, I would say. I remember the days when I first started, and I still can't believe I did this, but we had to block off a room when a HIV patient had come in for 12 hours because it couldn't be used because it was considered infected. Can you believe that?
Well, no, not anymore, no, but I suppose at the time the whole world was learning about it, weren't they?
Well, absolutely, and I look back at that and I still think that that attitude is still around, and I'm really, really, really surprised by it. We all know we shouldn't have unprotected sex, absolutely. But, gone are the days where we used to think drinking out the same cup or using the toilet. I don't know if you remember those rumours when they were around.
Or shaking someone's hand. Remember the famous Diana handshake, yeah. But it's interesting that Helen obviously thinks that, and she seems to be right as well, that even though there's been huge and very quick medical advances in the treatment of HIV and AIDS, not so necessarily in advances in attitude. What do you think the Sheen interview says about our current attitudes to HIV, despite all of those medical advances in treating people who are HIV positive? 0345 6060973, text 84850 or tweet at LBC, and you will find the interview with Charlie Sheen shortly, or not quite yet. No, already now, I'm being told, yes, on the LBC website, lbc.co.uk. 3:46.
Conversation. Ian Dale at Drive. This afternoon from 4 on LBC.
If you go to lbc.co.uk, you can see the interview that Charlie Sheen has given to NBC's Today programme, in which he reveals that he is HIV positive. Now, this all followed on from really quite an underhand and unpleasant campaign in some of the papers worldwide, really, the gossip columns and the newspapers, to get the Hollywood star who's HIV positive to reveal him or herself. Well, Charlie Sheen has. I'm sure he's not the only one, but anyway, Charlie Sheen has. And I wonder what you think the fact of the interview and the content of the interview says about our attitudes to HIV. He says over the 4 years since he was diagnosed, He's paid millions to people to try to keep it quiet, and he's decided, for one reason or another, and probably because of the pressure of articles like the ones I mentioned, he's decided to say that he has it, and as he put it, to free himself from this prison. Just before we talk to our next guest, let me read this to you. It's a text coming from someone who has been HIV positive for 20 years since being raped. Whilst my health is excellent and I work full-time, I'm single and I'm lonely. The stigma is awful, and potential partners run a mile when I disclose. If only there were more people like Charlie Sheen, then perhaps the stigma would start to diminish. In some respects, it is a living death. However, I'm grateful for the wonderful healthcare that I have had. So there you go. That's one person's experience of HIV and attitudes to HIV and fear still, clearly, of HIV. Luke Alexander joins me, an HIV activist who was diagnosed 2 years ago. Hello, Luke.
Hello there, good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon. It's almost the evening.
Sorry.
Do it myself all the time, don't worry. You'll have had experience of this, will you, over the 2 years, or has yours been more positive?
Mine's been dramatically positive, actually. I came out as HIV positive about 8 weeks after I was diagnosed. In hindsight, it's probably quite too soon. But what disgusts me the most about this story is the fact that Charlie Sheen has been blackmailed so much over so many years by numerous people, and then these tabloids in this country, I can't speak for any others, have made it a scandal. Hollywood, I believe the Sun posted something on the line of Hollywood HIV crisis and who has it. It's got to stop becoming sort of a game to out people, because I don't think people realise I've had HIV for 2 years, and although most of it has been remotely positive and largely positive, a lot of it has been negative, and a lot of it, the stigma from HIV can be incredibly detrimental to a person's self-esteem as well as their prospects in their career, their love life, and other matters.
Yeah, well, we heard from that previous text that that person has obviously had a bad response from prospective partners. Your life is a different experience by the sounds of it, Luke.
Yes, completely. I take one pill a day to keep HIV at bay, as it were, and I overall don't really have any problems. I do have depression, which can be at times a result of HIV stigma. So if there's anything I want people who are listening to me right now to take from this, is that people with HIV still have just as many emotions as you do.
All right, Luke, thank you. I'm going to stop you if I may, just because the line is very muffled. But the point that Luke was making there, that people who are HIV positive have exactly the same needs that you have, and they're as prone to anything that you or I are. Brian is calling from Dundee. Now, Brian, your dad was HIV positive.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. He got HIV when he was quite young. He had went to a party, and it was just one of your previous callers had made me call because he was saying that quite a significant amount of blood's needed to, contract the disease. Well, my dad, he was an IV drug user at the time, and all it took was one prick of a needle, and that was him and 6 of his friends all got the disease from this guy that they didn't know.
Sharing needles, were they?
Yeah. So it doesn't obviously need a significant amount of blood, because obviously
I think the caller before was talking about the question that I asked was, what if you come across a person who's heavily bleeding and needs help? Whereas when you're talking about a needle into a vein, it's a slightly different scenario, I suppose.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't work in the healthcare profession anymore, but I did. And then I think one of your previous callers was on about the universal precautions. But then, as you say, what do you do when you're in an emergency? I suppose it's difficult to decide, well, I could get HIV from this, or I can't, but this person might die. So what do you do? I
mean, you only have to look at the images that came out of Paris on Friday. If you'd been there and somebody was on the ground next to you in pain and shot, you'd help them. HIV wouldn't have entered my head.
Well, no, that's it. No, you just, adrenaline kicks in and you just go for it, don't you? But,
tell me what happened to your dad then.
So he had HIV, and then that progressed onto AIDS, and then because he got pneumonia, he died of pneumonia. So, because obviously it's not the HIV or the AIDS that kills you; it's usually a disease.
Yeah, it's not untypical, that, is it? Pneumonia as a.
Yeah. So.
I'm sorry to hear that, Brian.
Sorry?
I'm sorry to hear that for your family. Thank you for calling. Thanks for your call, Brian. Brian in Dundee. Jonathan has called from Ealing. Hello, Jonathan.
Oh, hi, Sheila. I just wanted to reiterate a lot of what's been said before, really, is the fact that I did first aid and I did advanced first aid, and it's called the universal. The way you treat all body fluids in first aid is the same for every single person, regardless of what they have, because there are much more highly infectious diseases, such as hepatitis, as was mentioned before, which you can just get from touch, let alone touching blood. But you always wear gloves. And I just feel sorry for people that there's still a stigma attached to it. As you just said, if somebody was on the ground, I'd run and help. I wouldn't think of hepatitis. I would help in whatever way I could. And I just don't think people should have to carry a card to pull out their pocket when they're half dying. I'm HIV. Do you know what I mean? I don't think we should go down that road.
Does it surprise you that all these years on, there is still that misconception about it?
It does, but Hollywood doesn't surprise me. If you look at the way they still censor films that come out of Hollywood, where they won't confront religion, they won't confront sex. I mean, it was Hollywood that made him, well, didn't make him, but the lovely actor you were talking to, Rock Hudson, had to pretend he was married because Hollywood wouldn't have employed him if they thought he was gay. And they still have. I still think there's some people, unfortunately, with those terribly backward views, which is such a shame, as you say, in 2015.
Yeah, I think we're increasingly seeing young actors and actresses in particular in Hollywood feeling comfortable enough to come out and just say who they are and how they want to live. But thanks for your call, Jonathan. Thanks for everyone who called over the last few hours. Don't forget, you can listen to LBC whenever and wherever you are. You can download the LBC app on your phone. Clive Bull with you from 7. Up next, Ian Dale.
Thank you very much, Sheila. As armed police stand by to protect football supporters at Wembley tonight, are we getting to the point where we should routinely arm the police, especially the Met Police? Or is the Met Commissioner right when he says that it would be un-British and giving in to terrorists?
There is a full team available 24 hours a day, waiting, just in case, that terrible thing which we hope won't happen, just in case it does happen.
But only one armed rapid response unit in London. Is that really enough? 03456 6060 973. And at 5, France has asked its European partners to join with it in its war against Daesh. Should this have an impact on our thoughts in the UK? If one of our closest allies asks us for help, do we not have a moral obligation to say yes?